Hi, I'm Sean and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to tell you about my personal journey to atheism. I'll warn you it's not super exciting, but it might be educational. So I was raised Roman Catholic. I went to a church called St. Thomas the Apostle in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, and I loved it. Every Sunday I would sing at the 10:30 Mass, and eventually I started singing at the 5:30 Mass as well, so twice a day on Sundays. And I would go to the camps and what are they called, CCD, which is, the Wednesday classes and all that kind of stuff. I was confirmed, all of that stuff. And every summer we would have a festival. This was my favorite part. We would get the Skinner amusement park rides. We would have a stage where we'd have bands and like lip sync contests. We'd have a clown, which was a personal friend of the family. Hey, Toby. And businesses would have their food stands, like pizza or whatever, and a bunch of volunteers would run games, including my family. We ran the mini barracuda races. Basically a trough, a gutter from a house, an 8-foot long trough with paint about a foot in on either side, filled with water. You'd dump in a little minnow and splash, and you couldn't put your hand past the line, and whoever got to the other end first won. You got your little stuffed Pikachu or whatever it was. And it was fun. It was just community. It wasn't even really about beating God into your head. It was just the community, and I loved that. But I found that I never really could get on board with the whole God thing. I remember specifically in elementary school, there was just a kid at school who said, I think the Bible is just a bunch of stories. And I said to myself, yeah, that sounds about right. And I didn't think about it. And when I was 12, I said something about it, and one of the, I don't even remember what the proper terminology, pastor, father, religious leader came to me, and all I remember about him is that he looked like George Costanza if he was actually friendly. And he asked, why don't you believe? And I said, I don't know, it just doesn't really make sense. And he didn't push it, and I didn't push it, and I didn't really think about it. Just, I don't know, didn't really make sense. And that's it. That's kind of where I was for most of my life. Just, I don't know, doesn't really make sense without digging deeper. And then I ended up finding this book called God No when I was in my late 20s. And it's by Penn Jillette, from Penn and Teller. And most of that was just weird stories about his life and magic and things like that. But sort of tangentially throughout, he would talk about being an atheist. And one of the things that he said was he thinks that agnostics are just kind of being cowardly and they can't just commit to one or the other. And I'm like, well, I don't really believe, so I guess I'll call myself an atheist. And that's kind of where it sat also for a little while. And the thing that got to me, the thing that kind of made me get to where I am now is there's a weird belief that tends to stick with Catholics more than other people, that because it says in the Bible that God took Adam's rib and created Eve out of that, that we believe that men have one less rib than women. I didn't believe the Adam and Eve story at all. I thought it was just like all other mythologies, like we can't explain lightning? Oh, it's Zeus. We can't explain the sun? Oh, it's Apollo. We can't explain why men have one less rib than women? Oh, God took that out and made women, and now men have one less rib than women moving forward. It was just something they didn't know how to explain, and that was just a random story that they threw together to explain it. But I still believed that men had one less rib than women. And I said this to my fiance. And she, who happens to be in the animal health industry, and during that had to take human anatomy as well, says, I don't think that's true. Like, yeah, and I went through the whole spiel of, that's why they created this story, Zeus, and I did the whole spiel. And she sat down on Google for 5 seconds and said, nope, men and women have the same number of ribs. I felt really stupid. This is a belief that not only did I hold without ever checking, but I was so adamant that I was right without ever doing any of the research. And I was wrong. And from that point on, I realized I need to do better. I need to check what I believe. So I started learning about standards of evidence. I started learning how to do research. I started learning about epistemology and philosophy. And I've always loved science. That's why this was so kind of traumatizing for me, I guess, in a way, because I love learning. I read a book about the periodic table of elements for fun. It's called The Disappearing Spoon. I highly recommend it. I read a book about plate tectonics for fun. I think it was called a Furnace of Creation, Cradle of Destruction. It was just about the evolution of the theory of plate tectonics. I read a book just about the universe at large. It's called The 4% Universe. I think it's by Michio Kaku. Again, I just read it for fun. I love to learn. I love learning about history. I love learning about science. I'm very proud of that. And yet I didn't do the research to determine that men and women have the same number of ribs. So as I did the research, I started questioning other things like, well, I don't really believe in God, but I never looked into it. So I looked into it. I looked into the Bible. I looked into the claims in the Bible. I looked into demonstrations and refutations of that. I looked into both sides to see where that came from. And then I realized, why am I focusing on the Bible? So I looked at the Quran and other texts, and I started to bring the scope out a little bit more and wonder, what is this God? Is it even something that we can demonstrate? And the more that I looked into it, I'm like, there's nothing here for me to grab onto to justify any kind of belief. So I already didn't believe it, but I looked to see what was out there, and I couldn't find it. And that's when I felt much more confident saying, I'm an atheist, but now I've got good reasons why I'm an atheist. And as I learned, I also learned how damaging religions and religious beliefs tend to be. Indoctrination, I would say, is almost tantamount to child abuse. It's basically convincing people, especially in the Christian religions, it's convincing children that they are wicked and they're sinners and that they're not worthy, and that's why Jesus needed to die in order to save them. But if they don't repent, they're going to be tortured for all eternity in hell. But if you repent, everything's good. So it instills this fear into them and then takes away this fear by offering them a solution. That fear didn't need to be in there in the first place, so you didn't need a solution. And that's a problem. And then people are passing laws based on these beliefs, and people are killing people based on these beliefs. And the more I learned about those things, the more I realized I need to be outspoken about this. I need to do my part to let people know why it's important to have good reasons for what you believe. And to be justified when you say, I don't believe, and what that means to be justified, and where to put the burden of proof. So that's my journey to atheism, and that's my journey to right here, right now. So if you have any comments, questions, concerns, please, you can leave them obviously in the comment section, or you can find me on Twitter at Sean Skeptic, or you can email me at seantheskeptic@gmail.com. And I hope you like, comment, subscribe, tell me other things you want to hear from future videos and all that, and yeah, share with your friends, please. Thanks. I'll see you guys later. Bye.